Hey everyone, welcome back to our next episode of 6 Feet Under Exhumed. I am Kari the Mortician.
I'm Faith, that mortuary professor. We are talking about season 2, episode 7 today. And I'm really excited. We have a special guest today. This is Jamie Sarche. And Jamie is the director of pre-planning at Feldman Mortuary in Denver. She and I are friends for quite a while now, and have done a lot of cool things together. But Feldman Mortuary is I guess I would say, I don't know, historically Jewish, traditionally
Yeah.
Jewish. Is that fair to say?
Historically.
Yeah, historically Jewish funeral home. And they serve, everybody, but historically the Jewish population. And they are now the oldest family-owned funeral home in the state of Colorado, which is really
That's
cool.
awesome.
So, Jamie, do you want to just give us a brief little intro bio and then we'll get into the episode?
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for giving me an excuse to get back to 6 feet under. Love 6 feet under. So I have been the director of pre-planning here for 15 years. And what's just amazing is I still feel as passionate about my work as I did the day I started, maybe even more so. So what I do is help people put their own funeral plans in place long before they're needed, giving themselves peace of mind and their loved ones a path to walk on when they need it most. And what's really interesting with how I approach my work and this episode, I really like my work because it's pushing up against the taboo of not being able to talk about death. I think that's really problematic. I assume you guys do too, that, death is the only experience that every one of us is going to have aside from birth. And I often compare it to our inability to talk about sex. And this episode just really raises that up. So I'm excited to talk about this with you guys.
Yay. Yeah. Well, and if I worked with you, I would never be able to say your whole name without being like, Sarche. Like, I feel like it needs a little, hey.
Okay, Jamie Sarche.
There we go.
Ooh, I love it. It's so sassy. It's fun. Well, let's dive in. So this one's called Back to the Garden, and it starts off with our deceased making a cocktail, and you're like, I love they're adding more like mystery to the beginning, so you really don't know who the deceased is going to be always or how they're going to die. And he's in like an exercise room. He looks like he just got home from work with his tie and everything, and he goes into this exercise room and you see him get a VCR tape. Come on,
Yes,
it's
the
VCR tape anymore. And you're like, is he going to exercise? Oh, he's going to watch some porn, but then he's got lemons and he kind of goes down this weird. You want to talk about it, Faith?
Oh yeah, sure, I'll talk about it.
Yeah,
So,
get it, girl.
get well. So he turns on the movie and he's doing his thing, and I don't know what is, some kind of strap or something. He puts
His
a belt around his neck, and then if you don't know already, you're going to find out that autoerotic asphyxiation is a thing where people will restrict their airflow or their air supply while having sex. And this is something that he apparently does in secret because it's the middle of the day, nobody's home, and ends up dying. So assumedly accidentally, because that probably wasn't part of the plan, but ends up strangling himself to death, and that's really it. And he's relatively young. What is he, 40s, I think? And so yeah, kind of an accidental suicide, I guess, if you will, if that's a thing. But
yeah, and it's Jeffrey Shapiro was his name.
Yep.
So they kind of go from that into all this other stuff, but later they circle back around to his death and Rico and stuff. So we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
They go back to the lemon and all of this.
Yeah.
Talk more. Have you guys seen autoerotic asphyxiation at your funeral homes at all as cause of death and stuff? I know we've had a couple that I've seen over the years.
Knowingly once or twice, but again, we don't always know the circumstances. We would just know that someone died of a ligature, string hanging, whatever it was. And so it's probable that, yeah, many more than I even know about. I was just telling listeners, I was just telling Kari and Jamie before we started recording that actually at the Colorado Coroners Conference here in Colorado, 3, 4 years ago, probably a little more than that, this was a big part of the conference and learning about this kind of death because it's actually fairly common and it's something, that now, from the family perspective, now you have something that looks like a suicide, but the truth of it is actually maybe worse, right? So these families have another layer, of things with these kind of deaths. So that was a really interesting topic. Yeah.
When you put it in quotation marks that way, do you think worse because like it's humiliating that they were
Yes,
masturbating?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that
Isn't that sort of
people,
fascinating?
it is, but that's somehow more embarrassing than, and not that suicide should never be embarrassing. It's
Right.
nothing to be embarrassed over, but it is stigmatized, and
But
that's
more
just true.
shame.
But
Yeah.
it adds more shame. It's like almost like you'd rather just them think that someone ended their own life than they did that accidentally while doing something else, which is really wild, really.
It is such a fascinating thing. Like I kept thinking about that during the episode. And like it was in what, the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So hopefully we've grown up a little, but I doubt we probably
But
have.
that
We don't
wasn't
do
a
that.
time where we were, puritanical
Right.
either, I
But we're
don't
pretty
think.
puritanical
Still,
as a
yeah,
society. We
true.
just are.
That's true.
And it is such a fascinating thing. Like that whole idea of like, do we tell the wife that we don't think it was purposeful? I mean, that whole idea of leaving her with this, why would he want to die? Why would he leave
Yeah.
us? I don't understand this. Like, what is worse than he was trying to enhance his orgasm?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Why is he was trying to enhance his orgasm worse? And it did seem that way. It was great, I thought, at the end. Is it
Yeah.
okay if I jump to the end? It was
Sure.
great, I thought, at the end where Nate said to her, I don't think this was purposeful. I was grateful that he said that.
Yeah.
But just the idea that the coroner's investigators
Yeah.
wouldn't say to her, we found this tape. We found this lemon. Here's
Right.
what we know.
I was under the impression, maybe I'm wrong, that she found him.
Well, I think she found him hanging called,
Okay.
and then
Yeah,
she didn't
okay.
really
Didn't
look
know all the things.
around. I mean, if
Yeah.
I found my partner hanging and dead, I don't think I would look in the VCR or
That's
wonder.
true.
I would, and the lemon,
That's
I would
true.
think, oh, maybe he
I wouldn't even
Spilled
know.
his drink.
he took a drink. Maybe it was
Notice.
something he just, took the lemon like a tequila shot or something. But, I think some of that, like, was I not enough for my partner that they felt they had to do this much? Or I think there's so many layers of where the mind can go that they do want to
Yeah.
protect. But I know the ones that we've cared for that they have determined that's what it was. That's what's on the death certificate. Like there's no hiding
Really?
it. It says,
Oh,
I've
yeah.
never seen that.
asphyxiation.
Well,
Yeah.
and again, think about it. I found myself thinking, if this were my spouse, would I be, would that be something I'd be ashamed of? I mean, I don't know that it'd be something I'd advertise,
Right.
but I don't know that I would hide it from my friends or any, I just don't know.
Or
But even
want it hidden from you.
there, thank you. Yes, that's what I mean. And even, I'm pretty open about just about anything, but even that to me, I'd be like, ooh, I don't. So there is still even some kind of shame with sex or masturbation or whatever. And then when it's
Yeah.
involved in a death, it's a whole nother level.
Well, I mean, look at.
Well, and that.
Oh, go ahead, Jamie.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, like, Kari, what you said of, am I not enough? I mean, I would hope that we get to a place that like watching porn, masturbating, if that's me or that's my spouse or whatever, that has nothing to do with anyone else.
Right.
It has nothing to do with anyone else. And the idea that pleasure should be shameful is just bad. I do think that like, it's just so dumb. It's so risky. It's such a risky behavior that I would hope most 40-year-olds would understand that they're taking a big risk here.
Yeah.
When I was in 8th grade, this wasn't about anything sexual, but like in 8th grade, one of the games we
That
would
was a
play is
thing.
push
Yep.
up against our
Yes.
necks
Yep.
and pass out. And
Yeah.
thank God I didn't die. I didn't know anybody who did, but people do.
Yeah.
And so I would hope that we would start talking about this stuff. So stigma as a
Mhm.
whole is just so dangerous.
Right.
And that's what I think about with suicide, with masturbation, with talking about death as a whole. Like, like one of the things I always say about,
I was just going to ask you to say that. I think I know what you're going to say. Go
I'm
ahead.
sure you do. So one of the things that I always talk about is like the language that we use about death, and that people don't even say the word die. Like I heard somebody talking about the Tree of Life massacre and talking about how their friends passed away in the Tree of Life massacre. This was on the radio. And I'm like shaking the radio and like screaming, they didn't pass away. They were murdered. Like let's start using correct language. And it's just so fascinating to me how it really is how a generation or two ago, we used to teach kids about their body parts by talking about their wee-wee and their pee-pee and their hoo-ha. And that euphemistic way of approaching this stuff just says, don't talk about it. It's shameful and weird. You're not allowed to talk about these things. And when we cannot talk about these things, this is when dangerous, horrible stuff happens.
Yep, exactly.
I was going to say, look at TikTok now and how many women post the, ooh, choke me daddy thing.
I know.
All of that. And I'm like,
what the hell is that?
Not my thing, but good on you for being open to talk about maybe something you like in the bedroom. But that's all, that again is a risky behavior with
it's a risky behavior,
partners.
But the other thing that is freaking me out about it is saying to young women that this is stuff if you're a sexual being,
you got to get
that
choked.
is the approach. My son, who's 28, I hope I'm not breaking any I don't think I am. My son, who's that age, has told me every woman he's dated asks for that. Are you kidding? I don't think that is I don't know. I don't want to stigmatize anybody in this case, but I also don't want women to think this is who they have to be to be sexually attractive to people.
But can I explain something to you if you want to hear? This show is going off
Please.
the rails, and I hope our listeners are okay with it. So what that's about, and I know this personally for myself, because it is something that I'm into, what that's about psychologically, and I can only speak for myself, is what a lot of you're right. A lot of like young women thinks it makes them like cool and hypersexual.
Yeah, if they're into it, I don't want to. I'm not shaming anybody.
Ones that are into it, what it comes from, I think, is it's oftentimes women that have a lot of authority and a lot of power in their daily lives. And so in my life, everywhere I go, I'm in charge. I'm in charge at the shop. I'm in charge at the school. I'm in charge at the house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just
this way you're not.
And then there's an opportunity to not be, and there's some psychological
the dominant, letting go
there.
Of dominance control.
And I don't mean to judge. The
only thing not at all. Not at all.
Find what works for you.
Yeah.
Not this is who you have to be because this is what society says makes you a sexual person or exciting to people.
Yeah. I do have a question for you, Jamie, because I feel like I don't know why I don't know the answer to this. I feel like I do, but I don't think they talked a lot in the episode about the Jewish reaction, I guess, maybe to a suicide. Is that
I didn't like that.
Yeah. What's
I paid attention. I think there's going to be multiple truths.
Sure.
And you probably know this, but I don't know if everybody knows this, that like in Judaism, there's not like one overarching thing. There are and she said this actually in the episode, the rabbi said this of like, I'm going to answer your question with another question because that's very Jewish.
Mhm.
and we don't have exact answers. So what I would say is, like, many years ago, somebody who had taken their own life would not be buried in the main part of the cemetery.
In a
These
Jewish
days, in a Jewish
Okay.
cemetery, they would be stigmatized.
Okay.
These days, I have not found that to be true at all. I think that the view is someone who took their life has a mental health problem, and we wouldn't stigmatize them any more than somebody who died of cancer. So I don't see that at all. I thought that idea of we're not going to have this service at our synagogue was
Yeah.
really upsetting. You know, that was upsetting to me, that here we have to be shamed. I will tell you, I so appreciate the families when they do have a loved one who takes their life, that when they actually share it in a newspaper notice, when they're open about it. I think that, first of all, it's just, again, if we can't talk about it, how do we navigate it?
Right.
So any of that stigma, I just think it's dangerous. I just think it's dangerous.
Yeah,
Oh, go
I
ahead.
wondered about that because I don't recall, and again, my experience with Jewish funerals and the Jewish population is that's probably not the right word either, is probably more than other funeral directors, because I lived in a Jewish funeral home, and that's kind of where I learned a lot
You
in my
know a
early
lot.
I do know a lot, and that was a population that I found myself in other funeral homes that I went to, being the one, asked to serve those families because other people were uncomfortable with them for whatever reason, because they didn't know enough, all of that. But I'm not Jewish myself, and there's a lot I don't really know about the belief system. But I didn't feel like that didn't sound right to me. That didn't seem like it would be in line
I,
with the Jewish values that I would say I know. I couldn't imagine that, at least in any of the, places I've worked, in any of the Jewish families that I've served, and the rabbis that I've worked with over the years, that just sounded wrong. So I just wanted to
I
ask.
agree. I agree. I don't think that's right. But again, many years ago, it might have been right.
Sure.
There's a huge concept of sin in the same way in Judaism.
Right.
I mean, there just isn't. But I do know, like, if somebody was a murderer, they might be buried on the edge of the cemetery.
Sure.
So there is some, I think it's going to depend on what cemetery. I think it's going to depend on what rabbi. I think it's going to depend on what level of observance. I mean,
Yeah.
again, there's just not one way, but I don't think that would be very common.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, let's dive in here. So we've got, kind of starts with, there's a thunderstorm and Keith dreams, because Keith and Dave are this little love story that we got blossoming in here. And he's dreaming that Dave's showing up at the house and they are making out and stuff. And then he wakes up because they're in turmoil about actually getting to the point that they can just be a couple and be in love. We're just fighting our feelings over here. They sit down and they have kind of the arrangement for it being a Jewish service. So you kind of find out that he is Jewish, and they call it a suicide. And what do you guys like to say? What phrases? I've had this discussion with people. When someone does take their life, how do you like to phrase it? What do you think
I
are
mirror
good?
what the family say.
Okay.
If I'm saying it first, I would probably say that they completed suicide or they died by suicide. But in general, I find for me it's safest to kind of, in any situation, kind of mirror the similar language to what the family uses, because at that moment it's not my job to educate them about the proper, way to talk about anything. I think we know, and maybe they learn in time, in other parts of their grief, that committed suicide is kind of not the best way to say anything anymore. But I mean, that's what people said for so long.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say that myself, but I'm not going to correct a family that uses that terminology.
What do you think, Jamie?
I'm with you. I think this stuff is hard. And like, I have a friend, actually, you know her too, Faith, whose son took his life
Yep.
and died by suicide. And she says he committed and he was very committed. That's what she really feels.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that this is interesting. I think that that idea of, you don't say somebody cancered. But I think that language is hard. And I don't know. I don't want to stigmatize somebody for whatever it is. I wonder, what do you think about saying someone took their life? Is that stigmatizing? Should we be saying died by? I don't know.
But we
I
don't
think
say died by cancer. Typically, we'll say they lost their
died
battle to
from
cancer or whatever. And we wouldn't say lost their battle to suicide. It would be like lost their battle to mental health. But maybe it wasn't mental health. Maybe it was just a choice and that was their choice and that's what they did.
I
So
think it depends on the family and the
yeah.
situation and how that I've had those conversations with families on how they wanted, things to be in obituaries or this or that. And some families, I mean, they're very, very different reactions to it. But again, just as professionals, I do think we have a obligation to educate families. I really do. But I think we have to know the time and the place. And so for me, in those really highly emotional, traumatic situations, I just find myself mirroring their language because that's what they can understand in that moment. And then, the hope is that in their grief, in the future that they're able to be connected with resources or whatever that can maybe, help with whatever they're going through. But I just don't think in an arrangement or at a funeral service, that's not the time to educate them about what they should be saying.
Right.
Because it's
Because
their
then it's telling them
person
what
and
they
it's
should be feeling
totally.
too.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think having that education available, from death professionals to a community is important. And we can absolutely do those things. But that was always something I've always struggled with as a funeral professional is knowing something, or knowing better, I guess, or thinking I knew better. And knowing that that's not the right time and place to give those people that information, but they need it. And how do you do that? And that's where aftercare comes in and pre-arranging and all those things. I think that's the place for that
It is
heavy.
easier to have those conversations
Yeah.
and people are more able. And also, you don't want to hurt somebody more.
No.
Kari, you said something though that really struck me about saying you wouldn't say they lost their battle to suicide. And I really fight against even that language in illness too.
Right.
Like, why do we even say that? Can we stop saying
Negative.
that?
It's kind of
Yeah.
negative. When you say
Yeah.
committed
It's a failure.
something or lost, it's like they didn't lose. Like
They
they're
didn't fail. I mean, everybody dies. Some of us have cancer, some of us have accidents. We don't fail because our bodies are dead.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just phrases that are like the passed away or whatever. I always do the obituary, I put died, and I make them change it to something else if they don't like it.
That's nice.
Because I don't like pass. Where did they pass? They didn't pass anyway. Like they died. They didn't. I don't care if they put, I don't mind if they put like went to heaven or whatever. That's lovely. But I'm such a, here's the basics, here's the legit, this is fact, and you can flower it up the whatever way you feel necessary. And
You can say died and went to heaven.
yeah. But
but the verb
they died. Their
died.
physical form has died. But yeah,
Good
I've had
work.
families come in and I've had somebody like the spouse pull me aside and say, we're not talking about that they killed themselves. Nobody in this room is to know. It's heart attack, whatever, I don't want their parents to know or whatever. And then you have to kind of like, okay, so here we go, and just really avoid the elephant that's in the room and just focus on caring for rather than, dive into the reason you're there, which I think is not terrible, but I think it's also odd not to just say, I could see if it was the scenario of autoerotic asphyxiation, because I've had that where the gentleman had on women's clothing. He was doing this. He died. He was a prominent figure in the community. And it was very hush hush, all of the cause of death because of that. I get it. And I get that you want to keep it because you don't want people talking about your loved one beyond that. Maybe it was
Adding things
suicide or
to,
something.
yeah, sure.
I've been hearing though, like, so I am deep in the Micah Miller TikTok rabbit hole, the woman who's passed her husband, they're talking about anyway, but they keep saying unalived herself. And I'm like, is this a
Here's
TikTok
why.
thing?
No. I'll tell you why. Because a lot of like websites have a filter for those words and they'll take it down if they see
So we have to
suicide,
say
murder.
unalived.
Yeah, so they say those things because otherwise if TikTok has
I get
like
it.
flags,
I'm
somebody
like,
says
is this
certain
the
things,
new
it'll just
thing?
take
This
it
is a
down.
weird thing. I
It's
don't
not good.
Well, I mean, it's truth. It's kind of truth. Like to me, suicide is like the action and what you are doing is unaliving yourself. Like I get it, but I don't know. What do you guys think? Tell us what phrases and terms. We've done this in a video before. What do you guys feel
Put them in the
comfortable with?
Have
So
some other-
Unalived in my mind is like expired, is past, is transitioned, is somebody said celestially something.
Yeah.
I can't think of that. It was a really funny
Too
one that I
much.
can't think of. Too much. And died. They just died.
They died.
They
And
died.
it's okay. It's okay.
And it's okay.
It's okay.
It's going to happen for all of
It
us.
doesn't
It's
make them less
okay.
dead by changing the verbiage.
Yeah. I want to come back a little bit to the person who's like, we're not talking about this. They're really doing such a disservice to people in the processing of grief, because the processing of grief requires telling the story. And we can know somebody died and is dead, and we can know it, but it takes a long time to know it. And we need all that work to get that into our being, that somebody is dead and not in our life anymore. And that identity shift of I'm a daughter, now I'm not a daughter. Or I'm a wife, now I'm not a wife. God forbid I'm a parent, now I'm not a parent. Like that kind of stuff is really hard and we need it. And so our social construct of don't talk about this, find shame, don't tell anybody. It's so bad.
It's not healthy.
No.
I get in the moment, like you're fresh and you're super in shock and you think, well, I know this information and it has hit me hard. And if I don't let them know all of the information, maybe it won't be as hard for them. And it's like, you're not saving anybody anything, I think.
Today I was listening to a podcast and it was Gabor Mate talking about trauma. And he was saying that the trauma is not what happened. The trauma is our emotional processing and the wound that whatever happened causes. So like if you get hit on the head, the trauma is not the hit on the head. The trauma is the concussion. And so the concussion, these things are still present, which means they can be healed. And the healing of the trauma is that we have to acknowledge the trauma. We can't heal it if we don't acknowledge it. And so I just think that speaks so much to what we are talking about now.
No, for sure.
Oh, for sure.
So we go where the boys have met with this wife and the rabbi who is there, and they have their little bit of planning session. It was very brief, very, very brief. And then they go down to the basement where the guy is, and this is where they start talking about how it is not just suicide, and they kind of explain it more. What I love, so Rico says, I talked to Quincy down at the coroner's office, and I just giggled because there is a whole generation of people who will not get the reference of Quincy because it was a TV show where the medical examiner was named Quincy. So I just thought that was funny.
He even referred to him as the Quincy.
Yeah, he did.
The Quincy.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, really? Was he there? But so, and then they explain the lemon wedge, which I didn't know. I guess I'm
This
not.
doesn't seem like it would work.
I don't know if
Right.
that's enough because so they say that the lemon wedge, you put this lemon wedge in your mouth and you hold it. And then as you are getting to the orgasm, you bite down on it. It wakes you up from where you're almost passing out and then you come to. But they found the lemon wedge on the floor, hadn't been bitten into, told them that, yes, this is what it was because of the lemon wedge.
I think no. I think that no, no. That's probably some kind of urban legend, but I think they came
I
to that
don't know.
conclusion based on the whole picture, right? I don't.
Well,
Yeah.
and that guy might have believed that that would do it.
Yeah, it might have. I mean, maybe that's probably wasn't his first time either, you know.
Well, and if you're doing something like now, you would learn it on TikTok, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you're learning it from, verbal,
Yeah.
somebody sharing something with you, or you read something somewhere or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they go back, so they have that little discussion, kind of explain it. You can see Nate's like, well, he didn't want to do this. Like he's processing this whole episode. He's kind of processing so much information. We go back to the Keith and David. Keith tells David that he broke up with his boyfriend because after he has this dream, he kicks his boyfriend out of the house. He kind of gets all mad at, was his name Eddie? No.
Eddie.
Yeah. And kicks him out. And so they broke up and Keith calls Dave and Dave's like, what do you want? You told me you don't want to talk anymore. And he's like, well, I just wanted you to know that Eddie and I broke up. He's like, so? And then what I love is like Dave calls him back later and goes, why did you call me and tell me that? And he's like, I just thought you'd know because you're my friend. And he's like, I don't care if I'm just your friend or whatever. And I love those two so much. I just can't wait to get further into their relationship. And we've got
One thing I want to come back to really quick.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about what Nate was thinking, because Nate has really risky sexual behavior. And it was really kind of interesting to watch that and to think about who he is.
Yeah.
And then watch him with Brenda, who also has really risky sexual behavior. And that's been a big part of their relationship. To watch him saying to her, at the end, I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. And this was obviously not meeting Brenda's needs. But I just wonder if Nate was trying to be a different person in this relationship than he is, because they're going to get married. And he's saying to this rabbi, I'm not sure that she's my soulmate. And I don't know that she makes me better than I am. That's what the rabbi was saying is the soulmate, which I loved as the definition of the soulmate. And I just thought that was sort of fascinating to, Nate is somebody you would see doing this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for him, part of it too is at this point, he hasn't told Brenda about his brain condition. Has he? No, he hasn't.
Right.
And I think that that's part of it, like, this idea that there was something that this woman finds out about that she didn't know about, that makes it worse. And then like when he was at the funeral and he saw Brenda standing there, I think for him it was the realization that if something happened to him, Brenda would be shocked because she would find out that he was keeping something from her.
Right. Dying with the secret, essentially.
Yeah.
And it coming out. But I mean, Brenda wouldn't know that he had known. It could have been a total surprise to everybody, unless Dave kind of divulged, which he wouldn't know. But I think you're right. I hadn't even thought of that he is mirroring the dying with a secret kind of thing and being found and leaving her early. And what does it do to the wife and, kind of the trauma after. So Brenda's continuing hanging out with her friend who is a prostitute, for lack of better. And then Nate,
a sex worker.
Sex worker.
Let's go with that. And Nate comes home and meets her. And so he kind of, gets introduced to this woman who is Brenda's idol right now in some weird, gross way. Then we've got Keith asks out David and Dave's like, yes, of course. So those two are back and forth. We've got Ruth, God bless Ruth. Like, I felt bad for her in this where she eats by herself. And it is such a stark realization, I think, for her of this life that she's now in, that if she doesn't have a partner, her kids are all grown, they've all
Yep.
left, and she's going to sit and make one meal for herself. I love she had 4 little potatoes or whatever. She had her 3 little Brussels sprouts and her 1 little pork thing, and she's like making her little independent meal. It's hard to cook for 1 people. I won't lie. I remember back to being in, an apartment by myself and having to cook for myself. And that's a challenge.
She's so rigid though, like how she laid out her potatoes and like, she's just so rigid. But that piece I loved when she invited her coworker over for dinner and she's like, shut up, shut up, shut up. I mean, that didn't seem like her.
She realized, I think, why she's eating alone, because she drove everybody off because she sat and heard, I think, Robbie talking about the plan and building her blueprint. And that's all he sat and talked about. And when she's like, Robbie, I think I am done with the plan. I think I am good. And then it was like, she realized, I think, what had transpired a bit, that she was about obnoxious because of what she had been saying. And that's why.
And then we heard from her sister something I thought that was so powerful, of that idea of, be nice to your mom, have compassion for your mom, because I think she's just worried that she isn't enough for us, that she can't share herself with us because she is afraid we won't accept her. Mm-hmm.
So Claire goes to visit her aunt, who's hippie chick out in, the woods and stuff, and kind of goes spontaneously because she had told her, come whenever you want. And she ends up coming during this big celestial whatever weekend that they're going to have. And it's basically just all of her friends come and they all get high and drink and naked and whatever they're doing. And whether there's orgy swapping, I don't know. And one of the couples, their son comes. So Claire gets interested and ends up chatting with this boy. And she's like, I didn't bring a condom. We're not going to sleep. And he's like, I don't want to have sex. I just want to sit with you. And she's like, what? Like, what? He's not the usual boy that she's ever been around. And so I think that she is confused by him. Which I think I've gone through the, not bad boy, but when you're with a kind of a certain kind of guy and then you're with another, you're like, but don't you want to like whatever?
Also, there's that idea of like, what is your value? Right. Like, is your value only sexual, or is somebody just interested in talking? And then, like he's definitely into her. Yeah. But he would like to slow the process down and actually get to know her.
Well, and I think for teenage boys, you expect that if there's a chance to touch a boobie, they're going to touch a boobie if they're into boobies. So, it's
not just teenage boys.
Yes. So they do all that. Then we've got, what other do we've got? Rico and the wife and the contractor, his cousin, and we keep going back to that and the scene, and you keep one that like builds like where we get to, where are we at, and
still more shame. With the contractor, still more shame. Like, first of all, this is the only episode I've seen in a long time. Yeah. So I can assume what's happened, that Rico thought that this contractor has it in for Vanessa, and that Vanessa's into him, and then comes home and finds him having sex with one of his colleagues and gay sex. Yeah. And Rico just lost his mind. And then shamed him so much, called him names. Yep. Like it was so awful. And then like to fire him and just so yucky.
Kind of goes back to what he said to Nate or to Dave in the basement. Like, people can do that, but we don't talk about it. Like, it's just there. And so we don't really talk about it. Rico sneaks home to check, finds the contractor. And then, Nate and the rabbi have this beautiful kind of discussion about life and everything, they're like they're super flirty with each other. So I keep waiting for like, oh, is he gonna like what's gonna happen? And then he tells her that he's with somebody, and she seems kind of surprised, I think, because they were very flirty. And then they talk the whole soulmate thing.
She's like, but I wouldn't date you because you're not Jewish. Is that real?
Yeah.
That's not in what?
Oh,
Where?
no, that's real. Especially for a
Real?
rabbi.
For
Oh,
a rabbi. Okay, for a rabbi, yes. Okay, for a rabbi.
But
I guess
also
it's
lots
just
of people.
okay.
Lots of people.
Even
Yeah.
that age, even I guess, well, they're not really younger people, they're middle-aged, but
That's crazy.
Yeah. No,
okay.
because they wouldn't have a long-term relationship.
Huh.
They could
How
convert.
observant would a person need to be that would be a
Sure,
rule
that's
breaker?
about observance. Like my kids, my older one in particular, it's important to him to marry
Okay.
somebody that's Jewish, and he's not super observant.
Huh.
It's just about like having more in common.
Okay.
And like for me, I didn't make a point of marrying a Jewish person. And quite honestly, my husband is like, he is Jewish, but he's not into it at all.
Yeah.
But like, I'm really grateful that he's Jewish because like, I don't think I would like to have a Christmas tree, and I'm not observant,
That
but like
makes
that
sense.
idea,
Yeah.
like it's important to me.
Yeah.
Huh.
That makes
I
sense.
feel lucky that at 23, I made that decision, even though I didn't know that was important to me.
Huh. Okay.
So Nate makes a comment, which I just have to point out. He says something about the store structure that is going to go, or he used to work at Structure or something. Do you guys remember the store
What?
structure back in the day? Like it was
No, the
big,
clothing store?
a clothing store. It was a big deal. It was kind of a big deal. Yeah.
Oh,
Was it
okay.
in certain parts of the country? I don't know it.
No, it was a big deal. And I was just like, oh, sometimes the show dates itself so much just by some of the references and things. And that was one I was like, ooh. Then let's see. Oh, then Taylor, Keith's niece, is complaining about her stomach, and Keith's
Oh,
pulling her
yeah.
off, and ends up she has an appendix burst, and he takes her to the hospital
Yeah.
and has surgery and stuff. And it's a big realization to him that he needs to listen more and be more present with kind of what's going on. And then I put it in quotes, but I don't remember who said this. Life is about striving for perfection.
That's
Keith.
what Keith said.
Was that Keith? Okay. Because I couldn't remember. I just made the quote, and it was after the niece comment. And
Yeah.
that it makes me feel so sad, because I would not imagine him saying it. I would imagine Dave saying it, because Keith seems to be, here I am. This is life.
When he's in a good mood, when he's stressed out, though,
Yeah.
he goes right to being angry and controlling.
Yes, he does.
It's a response, from him. Yeah, I mean,
I'm
I
gonna
don't,
say I did love that when Keith was on the phone with David. There's his partner, his police officer partner, and
yeah,
he's just his partner knows he's gay. It's
Yep.
not a problem. It was just, that was a nice thing to see
Yeah.
that not everybody has to be hidden about their homosexuality.
Right.
Yep. I agree with that. I think I said that in one of the last recordings we did. Like the first season was very much about David coming out, and this season it's not that anymore. They're just a couple with the same problems as everybody else, and I think that's awesome, especially for 25 years ago and an interracial couple. I think we forget that was kind of controversial to be on TV, at that time, but it's not about them being gay men anymore. They're just in a messed up relationship like everybody else,
And who would not want to be with Keith?
right?
Oh my God, that man is handsome.
Yes.
Oh,
He's a beautiful man. He is a beautiful man. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we got Brenda has lunch with her mom, goes to visit her. She kicks her out and says, I have to cry now because of my moment. And so, because she's in her new apartment. So that was kind of a quick thing, her with her
Ugh.
mom. Her apartment, though, she has this plastic, janky bench in her entryway. And I even
it's
made note of it.
lucite.
It's terrible. It's terrible. It needs to go. Go, go, go. But I was like, oh my God, for being so bougie and everything, she's so like, oh, I have so much money and I'm this, but she had such it just was terrible. Let's see. Brenda keeps wanting to have sexual encounters with people. Like she keeps pushing the limit, daydreaming and stuff. So we're on an upward here until we get that peak there, because she's going to go for it at some point, because she is just determined to, I think, have that high that she had with Nate when they first met. And she's not getting it with him. It's super blah to her now when they sleep together. And
well, and you can see, like, we're seeing some of her family dynamic, you know, like we're seeing something that makes her, she's trying to do something to push away from her parents, who are whatever their story is, you know, I don't know, but she's doing something that is, she's trying to heal something in her life.
yeah.
And that is the way she knows how.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go back to the soulmate comment quick here too. The person who forces your soul to grow the most.
That's a good place. Yeah, that's a good
love that so much.
place to
Just
wrap it up. But
because, yeah, it's so good.
you know who my soulmate is? I always tell people this, and look at me like I'm crazy. It's not Cece, it's my daughter.
Because
You know,
she's part of you. There's nothing.
she is. And
Yeah.
people like soulmate doesn't have to be, I know it's a romantic term in the context of this show, but that explanation of it, I think, just kind of was really nice, because it doesn't have to be your romantic partner. I think for me, that it's my daughter, because she has caused me to grow the most, undoubtedly.
Well, and if you want to look at it in terms of like death and spirituality, you probably have lots of soulmates.
True.
And there are people, I believe, in your soul connection, that's the job. The job is, you know, to come in and help you to change and become the best that you can be in each lifetime.
Yeah.
Well, and the way this show closes out this episode is Claire gets back and has brought this tape that Aunt Sarah gave her, and she plays it. Her mom finds it and puts it in and plays it. And Claire comes down and sees that her mom's in the kitchen singing, and the tape had said Ruth's song on it. And Ruth is like singing it, and I'm like, is that Ruth originally singing it? Did Ruth write this, and was she a singer? Like, they never.
I thought that was Joni Mitchell.
I don't think it
is it.
I don't think it was Ruth singing. I think it was just maybe a song she liked that would not be something that you'd expect she would like.
I couldn't figure it out, but I thought it was just, I love these little beautiful mother-daughter moments. Maybe because I have daughters, you do too, dude. You know, it's just, I love those little moments. And so that's kind of how it closed. We get these beautiful little glimpses of Ruth in these moments that we wouldn't anticipate for her. I just want her to wear like a hot red dress that's form-fitting and put her hair up and like go out or put it down, because she's always
Down.
go out and like just be Ruth and get it, girl, because she's our age. She's
Thanks, lady.
Age. Like, come on.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Wrapping up their episode 7.
Episode 7 already.
We're
Yeah.
flying through the season, and so much. That one had a lot of story build and a lot happened.
It did. Yeah.
And
I appreciate you bringing that up, kind of the connection between sex and death, because I don't know why I didn't make that connection when I was watching
no,
it,
I
but
think
it's
that's great.
true. It's so true. And I wonder now, watching the rest, because I've watched this show through multiple times, and I wonder now, like, watching that through, how much of that
A lot of
I
taboos
never
together.
even like put those two together. But you're so right about that.
Well, and I do think that there's so much in this whole show about shame and stigma and hiding. And I do think that those things in our society are so interconnected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, thanks for being here, Jamie. We appreciate
Such a pleasure.
Awesome to have you. Maybe you'd like to do it again. We've got another
It's
2.5 seasons to go, but
yeah.
But we appreciate you, and any comments or questions, or if there's anything anybody wants to know about Jewish funerals or anything like that. It really didn't go much into a lot of the traditions or anything in this episode, which surprised me. I was like, man, they don't talk about anything, but there's a lot there. So leave them in the comments and we'll get them answered for you.
One thing I just want to say that you triggered for me, I did like how when they were at Shiva, that people were being all the things that they are. They're making fun of this person. They're talking deeply about it. Like that is what it all is. We can talk about the fullness.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that is true. I did notice that. Any final thoughts? Anybody? All right.
What a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Great to
Bye,
see you.
guys.
Bye.
Bye, Jamie.